Forget the marble statues and the epic battles. The true pulse of ancient Rome beat in the humid, echoing halls of the public baths. This is not the story of an emperor, but of the public bath attendant, the unseen engine of the empire's most vital social ritual. By the end, you will not just learn history, you will feel the weight of the wood you carried and hear the secrets whispered in the steam. What was it like to hold a senator's fortune in your hands one moment and scrape the grime from his skin the next? How could a simple loincloth mark you as both invisible and indispensable? Your shift starts now in a world of luxury, labor, and startling intimacy. What does it mean to build an empire on the backs of the unseen? Your workplace was a sprawling palace dedicated to the human body and the social contract. Step through the grand entrance of a major bath complex like the Baths of Caracalla, and you left the dusty, crowded streets of Rome behind. You entered a world of soaring arches, shimmering mosaics, and the gentle music of flowing water. This was not a single room with a tub, it was a self-contained city block of leisure. Patrons would first exercise in the open-air palestra, wrestling or lifting weights under the sun. They might stroll through shaded gardens, visit the library to hear a poet recite, or grab a snack from one of the many vendors. The bath ritual itself was a journey through temperature, moving from the warm tepidarium to the hot caldarium for a deep sweat to a shocking plunge in the cold frigidarium. Every corner of this complex hummed with conversation. In one alcove, a senator might be negotiating a business contract, his voice low. In the garden, a group of young men debated the latest chariot race results, their laughter echoing. Near the heated pools, philosophers argued about the nature of the gods, their gestures reflected in the steamy air. As the bath attendant, you moved through all of it. You were the silent witness, the necessary fixture. While a wealthy merchant bragged about his new shipment of silk from the east, you were the one ensuring the furnace beneath his favorite hot room burned steadily. While two politicians exchanged glances that spoke of a conspiracy, you were the one folding their towels, close enough to hear a hissed name or a veiled threat. Your invisibility was your front row seat. The baths were the great leveler in theory, a place where citizen and freedman might share the same water, but the social hierarchy was performed with every gesture. A rich man arrived with an entourage of slaves, including you. He would be oiled, scraped, and pampered in full view, a public display of his wealth and comfort. Your presence, your labor, was part of that display. You were not just maintaining a building, you were maintaining the stage upon which Roman society acted out its daily drama of power, pleasure, and connection. So before you pick up a single strigil, understand the arena. You are not in a service job, you are inside the beating heart of the empire's social life, and every whisper, every deal, every performance of status happens right in front of you. The door to this world of steam and secrets did not open with a choice. You did not apply to become a bath attendant. In most cases, this life was assigned to you at birth. Your resume was written in your social status. For the vast majority, the job began in chains. You were a slave, property of the state, or a wealthy citizen who leased your labor to the bathhouse manager, the conductor of this daily symphony of sweat and water. Your body was not your own, and your day belonged to the endless rhythm of the baths. Even for those who were technically free, the options were grim. A freedman, once a slave himself, might find this one of the few ways to earn a living, while the poorest Roman citizens, desperate for any coin, would take the job for a wage so meager it barely covered bread and rent. There was no interview, no list of qualifications. Your fate was sealed by the circumstances of your birth, a simple and brutal fact of Roman life, and within the humid walls of the bathhouse, a strict hierarchy dictated your every move. At the top was the manager, often a shrewd freedman who understood profit and patronage. Below him were the specialists, like the furnace stokers who kept the hypocaust system blazing, a job requiring strength and a tolerance for hellish heat. Then came the senior attendants, those who had earned a measure of trust. They might handle the oils and perfumes, or manage the valuable linen stores. And at the very bottom, where you would certainly start, was the most basic, relentless labor. Your first day meant hauling firewood, endless, back-breaking loads of it, fed into the furnace mouths beneath the marble floors. It meant cleaning, not with a mop, but on your hands and knees, scrubbing the slick scum from the pool edges, collecting the hair and grime left behind after a scraping. You were the human broom, the silent remover of all evidence from the thousands of bodies that passed through. You fetched and carried, responding to snapped fingers and curt commands. You learned the geography of the complex not as a patron would, through leisure, but as a worker does, through the shortest paths between drudgeries. This was your apprenticeship. Your invisibility was earned through exhaustion, but in that exhaustion, you also learned to see everything. You learned which senator preferred his strigil warmed by the furnace first. You noticed which merchant always arrived with a heavy purse that seemed lighter when he left. You saw the quick, furtive exchanges that happened in the steam, where words were swallowed by the mist. You started at the bottom, but that low position gave you a view of the entire machine, from its fiery foundations to the glittering performances above. And in that space between the grime and the grandeur, secrets had a way of settling like dust, right where you were already looking. The night's chill still clung to the stones as you arrived in darkness. Your world was now one of fire and shadow. In the cavernous furnace rooms, the prefurnia, the previous day's coals were mere ghosts of warmth. Your first task was to wake the giant. You and others began hauling armfuls of rough-cut wood, feeding the hungry mouths of the brick fireboxes. This was not delicate work. Splinters dug into your palms, and the dust of bark and dried sap filled your nose with every load. The goal was a roaring, consistent blaze, because the water in the giant bronze boilers above had to be piping hot long before the first patron demanded it. A lukewarm caldarium meant an angry manager and likely a deduction from your meager pay or worse. You learned to judge the heat not just by the flame, but by the sound, a deep, resonant roar that vibrated up through the very floor. Next, you checked the labyrinth beneath your feet, the hypocaust system. On your knees with a clay lamp, you peered into the low channels under the bath floors. You were checking for blockages or cracks in the brick pillars that held the marble slabs aloft. A collapsed pillar meant a cold room and a crisis. Your hand brushed the warm soot coating everything, the accumulated breath of 1,000 fires. This hidden, sooty underworld was your responsibility. It was the unseen engine that made the luxury above possible. While the furnaces built their fury, others tackled the frigidarium. The cold plunge pool from yesterday was a soup of floating leaves, stray hair, and the general residue of 1,000 bodies. You drained it, then scrubbed the mosaic bottom with rough brushes and sand, the cold water numbing your hands. Refilling it was a marathon of carrying amphorae or managing the aqueduct-fed pipes, the fresh water shockingly clear against the morning gloom. As the first gray light touched the high windows, the space transformed. The steam began to rise gently in the caldarium, a visible sign of your labor. The tepidarium reached its soothing warmth. The frigidarium glittered, inviting and bracing. The air lost the scent of night and ash, gaining the moist, clean smell of heated stone and water. Your body ached, your tunic was damp with a mix of night sweat and pool water, but the stage was set. You had turned a cold, empty monument back into a living organ of Roman society. The quiet would not last. The distant sound of the first city gates creaking open echoed your thought. The performance was about to begin, and you were no longer just the stagehand. You were about to become a crucial player in every patron's ritual. Your clothing was a testament to utility, not dignity. In the scorching heat of the caldarium, where the air itself felt like a wet blanket, a full tunic was impossible. For the male attendant, the standard was the subligaculum, a simple loincloth of rough linen. It was less a garment and more a functional minimum, a strip of cloth tied around the hips that left your back and legs bare to the steam and the splashing water. It chafed when soaked with sweat and pool water, clinging to your skin as you moved between the searing furnace rooms and the humid bath halls. In slightly cooler areas like the entryways or storage rooms, you might pull on a coarse, short tunic, often patched and stained with soot from the furnaces or greenish algae from the pools. It was a uniform of discomfort designed for a body in constant motion. Your feet were almost always bare. Slippery, wet marble was a constant danger, and leather sandals would have become waterlogged and treacherous within minutes. You learned to move with a careful, slightly splayed gait, your soles developing a tough grip on the slick surfaces. This practical attire, however, screamed your status to everyone who saw you. While patrons lounged in the nude, a state of leisure and equality, your near nakedness was one of labor. The subligaculum marked you as a body for work, not for pleasure or display. The wealthy patron, being oiled and scraped, saw your bare back bent in service. Your simple, rough cloth against his oiled skin was a silent, constant reinforcement of the social order. You were dressed for function, and your function was to facilitate his comfort. Even your lack of footwear was a class marker. A Roman citizen wore sandals, a sign of civilization. You, navigating the same floors, did so with the hardened feet of a laborer or a slave. Your uniform was invisible to those you served, yet it painted you as clearly as a brand. It was armor against the environment, but it also left you exposed, a walking symbol of the gritty physical reality that made all the marble and mosaic grandeur possible. The strigil feels cool and heavy in your hand, a simple curve of bronze or iron that becomes an extension of your own arm. This is your primary instrument, the tool that transforms you from a mere cleaner into a personal artisan of hygiene. After a patron has soaked in the humid heat of the caldarium, their pores wide open, they will slather themselves with olive oil, sometimes scented with lavender or rosemary. They then call for you. Your task is to scrape it all away, the oil now mixed with the loosened grime of the city, the sweat of exercise, and a layer of dead skin. The technique is everything. You must apply firm, even pressure, drawing the curved blade along the contours of their body in long, smooth strokes. You start at the feet, moving up the legs over the arms and back, following the muscle, never against it. The sound is a soft, gritty rasp, and the residue collects in the gutter of the strigil, a grayish, oily paste. Too much pressure and you risk breaking the skin, drawing a sharp rebuke or a slap. Too little and you leave a slick film, earning a dismissive sneer for your lazy work. It is a performance of controlled intimacy. You are touching a stranger's body with a metal blade, and their comfort rests entirely on your skill. This closeness breeds a strange, one-sided familiarity. As you work, conversations happen. A merchant, his eyes closed, might mutter about the incompetence of a business partner. A soldier bearing scars you carefully navigate could boast quietly about a recent campaign. You are a safe repository for these murmurs, a non-person to whom secrets can be whispered into the steam. Your silence is assumed, your discretion part of the service, and for exceptional service, for the perfect pressure that leaves the skin tingling and clean, there might be a reward. A small bronze coin, a sestertius, pressed discreetly into your palm as the patron rises. It is not a wage, but a gratuity, a direct acknowledgement of your personal skill. That coin means more than its buying power. It is a tiny crack in the wall of invisibility, a moment where your individual talent is seen. You pocket it quickly, your expression neutral, but you remember the face of the giver. In this economy of sweat and scraping, such small gestures build a fragile map of favor, one careful stroke at a time. The steam holds more than heat, it holds 1,000 silent rules. Your success as an attendant depends not on your strength with the strigil, but on your ability to navigate this invisible code of conduct. The first and most important rule is the economy of sight. You do not look a senator in the eye. Your gaze should remain lowered, fixed on the task at hand, on the water at his feet, on the towel in your grip. To meet his stare is an act of presumption, a challenge. You are part of the scenery, a useful fixture like the marble bench or the bronze spout. Your presence is required, but your personhood is not. This performance of invisibility must be paired with flawless anticipation. You learn preferences not through instruction, but through obsessive observation. The portly merchant from the Aventine Hill likes his scraping to start on the left shoulder always. The retired centurion with the livid scar across his ribs cannot bear the strigil near the old wound, so you dance around it with practiced grace. To ask would be to admit you hadn't learned, a failure of your role. This knowledge is your currency, discretion is your shield. You notice the young equestrian who arrives alone every third day, always reserving the same secluded alcove in the tepidarium. Minutes later, a veiled woman slips in through a side entrance. You are the one who ensures their towels and oil flask are delivered without a word, who stations yourself at a discreet distance to turn away any curious others. You see nothing, you hear nothing. Their secret is safe because your livelihood depends on it. To gossip about a patron's habits, to smirk at a whispered confidence, is a fireable offense or worse. The baths run on trust as much as they run on water. Breaking that trust means you are not just a bad attendant, you are a danger to the social fabric of the place. So you become a master of silent language. A slight tilt of a patron's head means fetch the cooler water. A snapped finger followed by a pointed glance means clear away that group of noisy youths. Your world is one of gestures and implications where a misread signal can bring a torrent of anger. You survive by being more perceptive than anyone realizes, by understanding your fixed and unchangeable place in this elaborate dance, all while making every patron feel as though they are the only soul in the room. This delicate balance is the true core of your profession, a tightrope walk over a pool of social consequence where a single misstep can drown you. The scrape of the strigil against skin is a sound of trust, but it is a trust balanced on a knife's edge. Your world is one of constant quiet peril. The furnaces you stoke are a dragon's breath away. A misstep near the prefurnia, a slip on the damp stone floor, and your bare arm or leg meets a searing hot pipe or the furnace's brick mouth. The burn is instant, a white-hot brand that leaves a blistering welt. You bind it with a strip of rag and keep working because the fires cannot falter, and your pain is irrelevant to the rhythm of the baths. The very floors you maintain are a trap. A spilled flask of oil, a puddle from the cold plunge, and the polished marble becomes a sheet of ice. A fall can shatter a kneecap or crack a skull, and the sound of your body hitting the floor is often met with annoyance, not concern, for you have disrupted the peace. Yet the most terrifying danger lies in your own hand. The strigil is a blade. If your grip slips on the oily handle, or if the patron shifts suddenly, that curved bronze edge can slice a shallow but bloody cut across their shoulder or thigh. In that frozen moment, the steam seems to vanish, all comfort evaporates. The offense is not the injury itself, which is usually minor, but the violation of the social contract. You, a lowly attendant, have drawn the blood of your superior. The punishment is swift and severe. It could be a beating right there on the wet floor, administered by the patron's own bodyguards or by the furious manager. It could mean a brutal flogging later, or a massive deduction from your wages that starves your family for a month. For a slave, it could mean being sold off to the mines, a death sentence by slow labor. Your hand, trained for gentle precision, now holds the instrument of your own potential ruin. And then there are the patrons themselves, emboldened by wine and the anonymity of the crowd. A drunk equestrian, insulted by a perceived slight, might backhand you for bringing water that is not cool enough. A group of rowdy young men, testing their power, might trip you as you pass, laughing as your load of towels scatters. You have no recourse. To raise a hand in your own defense is unthinkable, a crime that would see you crucified. Your body is not your own. It is a piece of equipment that absorbs the frustrations and cruelties of the day. You learn to make yourself smaller, to move with a fluid grace that avoids notice, to absorb insults without a flicker of reaction. The scars you collect are not badges of honor, but a hidden ledger of survival, etched not in ink, but in thin white lines on your skin and in the careful, fearful calculations behind your eyes. Every shift is a negotiation with hazard, where the price of a single mistake is paid not in coin, but in blood and bone. That complex aroma was more than just background noise. It was a layered map of your entire world. The first layer was fire and stone, the deep, smoky scent of oak and olive wood burning in the furnaces. It was a dry, ancient smell that clung to the back of your throat and settled into the fibers of your tunic. Mixed with it was the sharp, almost metallic tang of heated marble, as if the very walls were exhaling the breath of the mountain they were cut from. This was the base note, the foundation of the bathhouse scent. Then came the perfumes. When you uncorked a flask of oil for a patron, the air around you bloomed. There was the nutty, rich aroma of sesame oil, the most common and affordable. For those showing off their wealth, you might pour out a vial of oil infused with crushed lily flowers, a sweet, almost overwhelming fragrance, or myrtle, with its sharp, clean, medicinal edge. These scents did not simply linger, they traveled. They marked the path of the wealthy through the steam, a fragrant announcement of their presence that you carried on your hands and in the air around you. Beneath it all, however, was the constant low hum of humanity, the salty scent of fresh sweat from the palestra, the older, sour odor from the damp towels piled in the corner, the faint, animal smell of 1,000 bodies in various states of cleanliness. It was a smell you stopped noticing consciously, but it lived in the humid air, the great equalizer that no perfume could fully mask. And then, cutting through everything at certain moments, was the pungent, eye-watering odor from the latrines. Positioned conveniently near the bath complexes, their smell would drift in on a stray breeze or when a door was opened. a stark, crude reminder of the reality of the bodies being so meticulously cleaned just a few paces away. For you, these scents were not separate. They blended into a single permanent perfume. After a 12-hour shift, you carried it home. The smoke from the furnaces was deep in your hair. The trace of myrtle oil lingered under your fingernails. The general musk of the baths was woven into your loincloth and tunic. Even after washing, a ghost of it remained on your skin. You could walk through the darkest alley in the Subura, and anyone who got close would know exactly where you worked. It was an invisible brand, a sensory signature that marked you as belonging to the world of steam and water long after you had left its gates. In a city that judged everything by sight and status, your profession was announced first not by what people saw, but by what they smelled. The steam that blurred their vision sharpened your hearing. In the warm embrace of the caldarium, a senator from one political faction, his body slack under your scraping, would murmur to his companion, his voice a low rumble barely audible over the drip of water. They spoke of a rival's weakness, of a vote to be bought, of a governor in a distant province whose loyalty was wavering. They believed the thick, rolling mist was a curtain, that the rhythmic rasp of your strigil was just noise. They did not consider you a listener, only a function like the sound of the furnace or the flow of the aqueduct, but you heard every word. This was not gossip, it was intelligence. In the tepidarium, two merchants, their faces flushed, would lean close over a shared cup of wine. They mentioned a ship delayed by storms, a warehouse in Ostia suddenly empty, the price of Egyptian grain about to triple. This was not just talk, it was a forecast of fortune. To you, it was a map of opportunities and dangers you could never act upon, but were forced to carry. The baths were the empire's greatest, most open secret. For the powerful, it was a neutral ground, a place to meet without the formality of the home or the forum. The very act of shared nudity and vulnerability fostered a dangerous sense of confidentiality. They let their guard down, and their secrets pooled on the wet marble like spilled oil. Your position was uniquely perfect. You were always there, always close and constitutionally ignored. You moved from the hot room to the warm room to the gardens, your ears collecting fragments of conversations like a mosaic, each piece meaningless alone but potentially forming a devastating picture. The power of this information was absolute and utterly useless to you. Knowing that a certain tax collector was about to be investigated meant nothing unless you had wealth to hide. Hearing the details of a lucrative army supply contract could not fill your own purse. This knowledge was a burden, a weight in your stomach heavier than any load of firewood. Because the danger of possessing it was mortal, to be caught actively listening, to let your scraping stall as you strained to hear, was an immediate offense. A sharp glance, a sudden silence, then a demand to the manager for a new, less curious attendant. That could mean a beating or being sold off to a harder master. But the real, unthinkable danger was in repeating what you heard. To whisper a senator's secret to another servant for a crust of bread was to sign your own death warrant. If that secret then traveled, the origin would be traced back to the steam, back to the silent figure with the strigil. Your punishment would be a public example, a crucifixion on the road outside the city to remind every other invisible person of their place. So you mastered the art of hearing without listening. You let the words wash over you and through you, as if your mind were a sieve that caught only the grime of your labor and let the gold dust of conspiracy slip away. You learned to forget the moment you moved to the next patron. The most valuable currency in Rome flowed around you every day, and your survival depended on pretending you were too poor to even see it. This left you in a strange, suspended state, knowing more about the machinations of power than most citizens, yet being more powerless than any of them. You were the guardian of secrets you could not keep, because to remember them was to risk everything. The most valuable thing you handled was never the oil or the strigil. It was the simple linen pouch left in your care in the apoditerium, the changing room. Here the ritual began and ended. A patron would strip off his tunic, his sandals, his dignity, and place his worldly identity into a shallow niche in the wall, or more often, directly into your hands. In that pouch or folded garment could be anything from a few bronze coins for snacks to a senator's heavy gold signet ring, the literal seal of his power and wealth. In an instant, you transformed from a bath attendant into a security guard, a banker of trust. Theft in the baths was as common as the water itself. A slick opportunist could slip in, pretend to be a bather, and be gone with a purse before anyone noticed. And when something vanished, the first and only suspect was always you. The man who had just entrusted you with his life savings would now glare at you with raw, accusing hatred. Your protestations of innocence meant nothing. You were the guardian. The loss happened on your watch. To manage this immense risk, some larger bathhouses used a token system. A patron would give you his belongings and you would hand him a small, numbered terracotta disc. He kept this token, and its matching counterpart stayed with his property. It was a simple, clever system meant to prevent disputes, but it did not remove the weight. You now held a stack of these tokens, each one a physical representation of a trust you could not break. Losing a token was as bad as losing the pouch itself, and the token did nothing to soothe the panic when a particularly anxious patron, perhaps a merchant carrying a season's profits, would interrupt his bath twice to find you, hold up his disc and demand to see with his own eyes that his bundle was still there, untouched. You would nod silently, retrieve it, let him feel its weight, and then return it to the pile, all under his suspicious gaze. The penalty for failure was absolute. If a valuable went missing and you could not prove another's guilt, and you almost never could, the consequences were brutal. For a freedman or poor citizen attendant, it meant a thrashing that could break bones, followed by being dragged before a magistrate. The fine would be impossibly high, plunging your family into debt slavery. For a slave, the outcome was simpler and more terrifying. You would be held directly responsible for the full value of the lost item, a sum you could never repay. The likely sentence was to be sold, not to another bathhouse, but to the rock quarries or the sulfur mines, a short, agonizing death sentence delivered through dust and poison air. So you stood your post in the apoditerium with a different kind of sweat on your brow, not from heat but from dread. Your eyes constantly scanned the room, noting every stranger, every loiterer. You memorized faces, you arranged the bundles in a specific order only you understood. You became a fortress of vigilance because the ring on your finger was not gold, but the invisible, crushing band of total responsibility. In that quiet room of discarded garments, you held not just belongings, but the fragile thread of your own future, and one moment of misplaced trust could snap it forever. The changing room's quiet tension gave way to a different kind of energy in the open courtyard of the Palestra. Here, the air was filled not with whispered secrets, but with grunts of effort, the slap of skin on dust, and the rhythmic thud of heavy objects hitting the ground. Your duties followed the patrons into the sunlight, while one man strained to lift a halters, a stone or lead weight shaped like a modern dumbbell. You stood ready with a damp cloth to wipe down the wooden bench after he finished. When a group began a fast-paced game of Trigon, throwing a hard leather ball between three players, you were the one who fetched it when it sailed over a wall, your bare feet quick on the sun-warmed stone. Your most constant task was the water. You kept a large clay amphora filled and cool in the shade, ready to refill the ladle for a wrestler staggering from the scamma, the sand pit, his body slick with sweat and dust. This was not the passive service of the steam rooms. Here, you were part of the rhythm of exertion, a facilitator of the Roman obsession with the perfected male form. Watching them, you understood this was more than leisure. Every lift of a weight, every grapple in the sand was a rehearsal. Rome was a society built on the backbone of its citizen legionaries, and even in times of peace, the ideal of the soldier-citizen persisted. The man pushing his body to its limit was not just building muscle for appearance, he was maintaining the physical readiness that defined Roman virtue. You saw the older senators, their bodies softening, going through the motions with a determined nostalgia. You saw the young elites, their bodies unmarked by battle, training with a fierce competitiveness, striving to sculpt themselves into the marble statues that lined the porticos. The Palestra was where they performed their Romanness, a public display of discipline and strength that was as much about social status as it was about health. You handed a polished exercise ball, a paganica stuffed with feathers, to a wealthy merchant. His soft hands fumbled the catch, and you saw the flicker of embarrassment on his face. He was playing the part, but his body betrayed a life led by ledger books, not legionary drills. Your silent presence was a witness to both the genuine and the performative, to the sweat of honest effort and the anxious strain of social climbing. Your assistance here required a different kind of anticipation. In the baths, you learned preferences for temperature and pressure. In the Palestra, you learned patterns of pride and risk. You knew which young man would push himself to the point of nausea and need the water ladle held steady for him as he gasped. You learned to spot the moment in a wrestling match when a competitor's pride was about to turn to real anger, and you might, with a carefully timed approach to offer water, create a momentary pause to diffuse the tension. Your low status became a tool for peacekeeping. A sharp word from you would be insolence, but the interruption of a service was permissible, a subtle way to prevent a friendly contest from exploding into a bloody brawl that would upset the entire complex's harmony. In this sun-drenched arena of striving, you were more than a servant. You were a cog in the machine of Roman idealism, oiling the gears of their physical culture with your cloth, your water, and your silent, watchful understanding of the fragile line between athletic pursuit and injured pride. The scent of lilies in the steam was a luxury you measured by the drop. Your world extended beyond firewood and towels into the careful economy of the unguentaria, the delicate glass and ceramic flasks that held the bath's most precious liquids. Every morning you faced a logistical puzzle. A shipment of plain olive oil pressed from local groves arrived in large, heavy amphorae. This was the workhorse oil, the one you would decant into dozens of simple clay flasks for the general patrons. Its smell was earthy and familiar, the scent of the everyday Roman, but in a locked cabinet under the manager's watchful eye were the smaller, finer vessels. Here was the oil infused with rose petals from Campania, the extract of crushed cinnamon bark from the east, the rare spikenard that cost more per ounce than you earned in a year. Your hands learned the weight of wealth. When a senator or a wealthy equestrian arrived, the manager would give a slight nod, and you would retrieve the appropriate flask. You were not just handing over oil, you were presenting a symbol. The rich floral cloud that followed that patron was a silent announcement of his means, and your role in selecting it was a performance of deference to his status. Part of your duty was mixing. The most expensive perfumes often arrived as concentrated essences. You would take a small amount of base oil, usually a finer grade of olive or almond, and with a steady hand, add the essence drop by drop, stirring with a thin glass rod. This required focus. One drop too many was wasted profit, a loss that would come from your pay. One drop too few and the patron might complain the scent was weak, another mark against you. You became a chemist of luxury, your nose so attuned you could tell if a batch had been diluted even slightly, a common trick if someone upstream was skimming. And that was the constant gnawing temptation. A single flask of that spikenard perfume could buy your family meat for a month. A handful of the scented, oil-soaked linen balls used for cleaning could be sold in the alley behind the baths for a few extra copper coins. The manager counted every flask at the end of the day, his records meticulous, but in the chaos of the afternoon rush, who would notice if you poured a thin stream of common oil into your own small, hidden container? Who would miss a single perfume-soaked Strigil cleaning pad? The risk was astronomical. Getting caught meant not just losing your job, but being charged with theft, a crime that for someone of your station meant severe flogging or enslavement. Yet the proximity to such portable wealth was a constant test. You saw the careless waste every day, a rich man using enough rose oil to bathe in, half of it dripping unused onto the marble floor. That waste, so close to your own need, created a quiet, desperate friction. Your integrity was measured in droplets, and the sweet, heavy air you breathed was thick with the scent of both opportunity and ruin. The world of the women's baths was a mystery that unfolded on the other side of a wall. In the largest imperial complexes, there were often entirely separate wings or designated hours for female patrons. If you were a male attendant, your access ended at the dividing corridor. This separate sphere was staffed almost exclusively by women, often slaves or freedwomen themselves, who performed the same duties of stoking, cleaning, and scraping, but within a social landscape governed by different rules. The atmosphere, as described by the few male writers who dared comment, was reportedly less about political networking and more about intimate socializing and the meticulous cultivation of beauty. Here the gossip was of marriages and childbirths, of family alliances and domestic scandals. The tools of the trade expanded beyond the strigil. Female attendants would be skilled in applying elaborate cosmetics, mixing pastes of chalk and lead for pale complexions, or using soot and ochre to darken eyebrows and eyelids. They knew how to arrange intricate hairstyles, pinning and braiding with a dexterity that was an art form in itself. The air would be thick with the scent of different perfumes, lighter floral notes of violet and saffron replacing the heavier myrrh and cedar used by men. For a male slave, this world was mostly inaccessible. a realm of whispered laughter and private conversation heard only as a faint echo from behind a closed door. Your knowledge of it came secondhand from the female attendants you might pass in the storage rooms as they gathered their own supplies of oils and unguents. Their experiences mirrored yours in toil but differed in intimacy. They heard the anxieties of childbirth and the strategies of managing a household, secrets just as potent as any senatorial plot. This separation, however, was not absolute. In smaller, private bathhouses or in the provinces, mixed bathing did occur, and it scandalized the moralists of Rome. Conservative writers like Seneca would complain bitterly about the noise and impropriety, painting lurid pictures of degeneracy. For an attendant in such a place, the social calculations became infinitely more complex. You had to navigate not just hierarchy but propriety, avoiding any glance or gesture that could be misconstrued. The steam now held a different kind of tension, where the simple act of offering a strigil to a woman required a studied, neutral deference. These rare mixed environments were where the rigid ideals of Roman society strained against the messy reality of human behavior, and you, the ever-watchful attendant, became the silent regulator of a boundary that was constantly being tested. The final patron departs, the great bronze doors groan shut, and an eerie silence descends upon the vast, steamy halls. This is not the end of your day. It is the beginning of its most grueling chapter, the great reckoning with the physical residue of 1,000 bodies. The luxury has been consumed, and now you must confront its messy human aftermath. Your first task is the water. With heavy wooden plugs and a system of lead pipes, you begin draining the massive pools. The caldarium water, still warm, sluices away, carrying with it a visible film of olive oil that glistens on the surface like a rainbow. The frigidarium water, now tepid, reveals a different story. As the level drops, a collection of debris is left stranded on the intricate mosaic floor. You see clumps of hair, both coarse and fine, shed during vigorous scraping. There are stray fingernail clippings, a lost earring glinting dully in the fading light, and the inevitable leaves and dust that drifted in from the gardens. You and the others wade into the empty basin with stiff bristled brooms and buckets of coarse sand. You scrub on your hands and knees, the abrasive grit working the oil and grime out of the tiny tiles, your muscles burning with a familiar, deep fatigue. The scent of the day shifts from perfumed steam to the sharp, clean smell of wet stone and labor. Next, you turn to the marble. Every bench where a patron lounged, every floor where wet feet passed is now slick with a mixture of water, oil, and tracked in dirt from the street. You pour vinegar mixed with water onto the surfaces, the sharp tang cutting through the air, and scrape with strigil like tools called zystri, pushing the oily sludge into channels that lead to the drains. There is no artistry here, only repetition, each stroke erasing the ghostly imprint of the day's leisure. But the most universally dreaded duty awaits in a small, tiled room off the main corridor, the latrines. Here, the Roman commitment to public convenience meets its most visceral reality. The long stone bench with its keyhole openings over a flowing channel is now your domain. The communal sponge sticks, soaked in a bucket of salt water or vinegar for the next day's use, must be cleaned and sorted. The channel itself must be flushed thoroughly and checked for blockages, a task that requires a strong stomach and a complete suppression of the gag reflex. This is the unspoken foundation of the bathhouse's grandeur. The perfumes mask the scent of bodies, but this room and your work in it dealt with the unmaskable truth of human existence. As you scour, your mind might wander to the senator who spent an hour debating philosophy, now just a contributor to the mess you are elbow deep in cleaning. The merchant who haggled over the price of perfumes left behind the same basic residue as the poorest laborer. In this silent, empty space, the rigid social hierarchy of the daytime completely dissolves into a single democratic fact of biology that you alone must manage. This nightly purge is more than just cleaning. It is a ritual of restoration, a literal wiping of the slate. You are not just removing dirt, you are preparing the stage for tomorrow's performance, ensuring that when the doors open again, the marble will gleam, the water will sparkle, and the illusion of effortless, hygienic luxury will be perfectly intact. Your aching back and the smell of vinegar that clings to you long into the night are the true cost of that illusion, the hidden labor upon which the empire's clean conscience was built. The gleaming marble and sparkling water promised a ritual of purity, but the reality for your body was a daily assault. The Roman ideal was salubritas, a state of health and wholesomeness that the baths were built to promote. For the patron spending an hour, this might hold true. For you immersed in that environment for a third of your life, the truth was far grimmer. The warm, inviting waters of the tepidarium and caldarium were a perfect breeding ground. They were not drained and scrubbed after each use, only at the end of the day. From dawn until dusk, the same water bathed hundreds of bodies, each person adding their own layer of sweat, skin cells, oil, and unseen bacteria. The hot pool especially became a slowly simmering broth. The heat that soothed aching muscles also accelerated the growth of microorganisms. You waded into this constantly, your bare legs submerged as you cleaned the edges or retrieved a dropped strigil. The first consequence was on your skin. Constant exposure to this tepid, oily soup led to persistent rashes and infections. Your feet and lower legs, always wet, would develop angry, itchy patches that never fully healed, cracking and becoming portals for worse ailments. Your eyes, stung daily by the mingled sweat, perfume, and smoky air from the furnaces, were chronically red and irritated. You blinked against a perpetual gritty feeling, and eye infections that spread like gossip were a common hazard. But the most dangerous threat was in the air you breathed. The warm, moist atmosphere of the bath halls, while feeling cleansing, was a mist laden with mold spores from the damp corners and bacteria stirred up from the water's surface. For you, hauling wood in the sooty furnace rooms and then moving into this humid air, respiratory issues were a constant companion. A deep, rattling cough became part of your identity, a hack you could never quite shake, your lungs forever struggling against an environment that was for others a temporary escape. You embodied the central irony of the baths. You were the guardian of a public health institution, yet your own health was its most frequent casualty. While senators spoke of salubritas as a civic virtue, your body paid the price to maintain the illusion of it. Your cracked hands, your reddened eyes, and that ever-present cough were the true hidden costs of Rome's cleanliness, a daily contradiction you wore on your very skin. The coins you earned were never enough, but they were everything. For the slave attendant, there was no wage. Your food and a place on the storeroom floor were your compensation. Your only hope for personal gain was the sportula, the small gratuity pressed into your palm by a satisfied patron. That single bronze sestertius or copperas felt hot in your hand, a tiny piece of the outside world. The rules of its keeping were never clear. In some bathhouses, a cruel manager might demand a share of all tips, turning your moment of recognition into another form of extraction. In others, you might be allowed to keep them, building a secret hoard coin by coin. You learned to pocket the gift with a seamless, invisible motion, your face a mask of gratitude that hid the frantic calculation. Could this one buy a sweet fig from the market for your sister? Could 10 of them buy a better pair of sandals to replace your disintegrating ones? The sportula was a fragile thread of agency and a life of total control. For the freedman or poor citizen attendant, the equation was different but just as desperate. You received a daily wage, likely a few asses, the small copper coins that were the bedrock of Roman small trade. Let us put that into human terms. After a full day's labor, your wage might buy you one decent loaf of wheat bread. It might cover a bowl of lentil stew and a cup of the cheapest wine from a street vendor. It would not cover rent for a room, not if you ate. It would not buy a new tunic when yours wore through. This was subsistence, a life balanced on a knife's edge where a single day's illness, a single missed tip, meant an empty stomach. Every calculation was a subtraction of dignity. Do you spend your coin on food for yourself, or do you save it to send to your family in the countryside? Do you buy oil for your lamp to mend your tunic at night, or do you sit in the dark and save the copper? Yet within this brutal arithmetic lived a powerful, almost impossible dream, the dream of accumulation. For the slave, the dream was the peculium, the small fund of money a master might allow you to gather from tips and gifts. The law said it was still his property, but custom sometimes allowed a diligent slave to use it for a transcendent purpose, to buy your own freedom. The price was astronomically high, often hundreds or thousands of denarii, a sum that might as well have been the mountains of the moon, but the dream persisted. That sestertius for a perfect scraping was not just a coin, it was a grain of sand toward building an island of self. You would hide your hoard in a crack in the wall, in a hollowed out bit of firewood, feeling its weight grow with agonizing slowness. For the freedman, the dream shifted but remained just as distant. Your wages might one day, after years of scrimping, allow you to lease a small stall, to become the manager who counted the oil flasks rather than the one who carried them. You dreamed of moving your family from a single rented room into a small apartment with a window. You dreamed of your children not having to enter the steam at all. This was the quiet daily rebellion that fueled your labor. The backbreaking hauling of wood was measured not just in loads, but in fractions of a coin closer to a loaf of bread. The careful, discreet service was an investment in the spatula that might one day, in a decade or a lifetime, add up to a different kind of life. The bathhouse, for all its grandeur, was built on this economy of microscopic hopes, where the promise of a single copper coin could motivate a man to ignore his burning lungs and aching back for 12 hours straight. Your value was measured in the grime you removed, but your humanity persisted in the weight of the few coins you managed to hide away, each one a silent argument for a future you were not supposed to have. The steam still clung to your skin as you pushed open the heavy service door, leaving the echoing grandeur behind. For the slave attendant, this meant a short, weary walk to the back rooms of the complex itself, or to the cramped slave quarters in your owner's nearby domus. Your home was not a place of rest, but a storage room for human labor. You slept on a thin straw pallet in a windowless cell you likely shared with others, the air thick with the same scent of smoke and sweat you carried with you. Your dinner, if you were lucky, was a bowl of pulse, a thick porridge of boiled wheat or barley, sometimes with a few lentils or a splash of cheap fish sauce for flavor. You ate in silence, your body aching, the sounds of the city's nightlife a distant hum beyond the walls. If you had a family, they were likely owned by the same master, living in separate quarters. You might catch a glimpse of your wife in the courtyard as she drew water, or hear your child's voice from the kitchen, but private moments were rare and precious, stolen in whispers during a shared chore. For the freedman or the poorest citizen, the journey home wound through dark, narrow streets. You climbed endless, rickety stairs inside a towering insula, a Roman apartment block, to a single room on the 4th or 5th floor. The noise was constant, the crying of a baby next door, the arguing of a couple across the hall, the clatter of a cart on the street below. Your room was small, perhaps with a single small window overlooking a maze of rooftops. Your dinner was similarly meager, a piece of coarse bread dipped in oil or a stew of cheap vegetables, eaten from a clay bowl on your lap. Here, family life was compressed into this tiny, noisy space. Your wife might mend a tunic by the light of a single oil lamp, its flame guttering. Your children, if they slept at all, did so on mats in the corner. This was the time for quiet talk, for sharing the small events of the day, for trying to forget the ache in your shoulders and the sting in your eyes. But even this refuge was fragile. The cost of that room took most of your wages. The threat of slipping into debt, of losing this precarious freedom, was a shadow in every corner. Rest was not a luxury, it was a necessity you could barely afford. You would lay on your thin mattress, listening to the sounds of the city settling, and feel the deep chill of night seep into your bones, a stark contrast to the furnace heat of your day. In a few short hours, the dark would begin to fade and the cycle would demand you once more. Your few hours of freedom were not for living, but for recovering just enough strength to go back into the steam. That fragile night's rest could shatter with the first rumor of a festival. On ordinary days, the baths operated with a predictable, grinding rhythm, but on a public holiday, the emperor's birthday, or the wild revelry of the Saturnalia, the entire social contract of the place was torn up and thrown into the air. The complex would announce free admission, a gift to the people of Rome. What was a controlled ritual of leisure transformed overnight into a roaring, chaotic carnival. Your morning preparations took on a frantic wartime urgency. You hauled double the wood, stoking the furnaces to a fever pitch, knowing the demand for hot water would be insatiable. Every flask of oil was checked, every towel laid out in towering stacks. You braced yourself not for service but for siege. As the doors opened, the floodgates broke. They poured in not in dignified streams, but in a laughing, shouting, shoving torrent. The usual distinctions blurred instantly. The senator in his toga was jostled by a burly butcher still smelling of the market. A wealthy matron found herself sharing a bench with a group of giggling slave girls, all temporarily equal in the eyes of the free bath. The noise was deafening, a constant roar of conversation, splashing, and drunken song that echoed off the marble and multiplied in the steam. Your job was no longer about careful scraping or silent discretion. It became a frantic exercise in crowd control and damage limitation. You were a human dam trying to channel the chaos. One moment you were pulling a drunk young man back from the edge of the hot pool before he tumbled in head first. The next, you were stepping between two heated arguments that threatened to explode into a full brawl, using your body as a barrier and your most placating gestures to diffuse the tension. Theft was rampant in the crowded, jostling apoditerium, and you could only watch helplessly as a dozen purses changed hands in the confusion. Your strigil became less a tool of care and more a simple instrument of speed, scraping one body after another in an endless, oily assembly line. Yet within this exhausting madness, there was a raw, electric energy you never felt on normal days. The usual performances of status were impossible. In the universal drunken celebration, a kind of wild, temporary democracy took hold. You saw a lowly clerk boldly challenge a centurion to a wrestling match in the palestra, and to everyone's shock, the soldier accepted with a laugh. You heard political jokes being shouted that would have meant a beating on any other day, met now with roars of laughter from all classes. The air was thick with the smell of cheap wine and roasted sausages sold by vendors who slipped inside, adding to the festival atmosphere. For you it was a day of supreme exhaustion, but also of strange observation. You saw the empire not as a rigid hierarchy, but as a single, messy, celebrating organism. The pressure was off for everyone but you. The careful masks of dignity were dropped, revealing the simpler, louder, more chaotic humanity beneath. By the final hour, the scene was one of beautiful wreckage. The floors were slick with spilled wine as much as water. The pools were littered with flower petals thrown by revelers. Dozens slept where they collapsed, snoring on the marble benches. As you began the long, weary cleanup, moving through the aftermath of the party, you understood something profound. These wild days were a necessary pressure valve. The bath, so often a stage for social performance, became for one day a theater of release, and you were the overwhelmed stage manager, ensuring the celebration didn't literally burn the place down. It was the hardest day of your year, and in its chaotic, democratic joy, it showed you a version of Rome that the marble and mosaics usually worked very hard to hide. The philosopher Seneca's back was just another canvas for your strigil. You worked the curved bronze along his shoulders, feeling the tense knots of a man who spent his life thinking deep thoughts and navigating the treacherous court of Emperor Nero. He would not speak to you, of course, but he might be deep in conversation with a companion, his voice a low, measured murmur about the shortness of life or the futility of anger. To hear Stoic philosophy distilled in the steamy air, while you scraped the day's grime from its most famous living proponent, was a surreal collision of worlds. You were maintaining the very body that housed one of Rome's greatest minds, and the intimacy of the act was entirely lost on him. You were a function, a living tool. Yet for you it was a moment seared into memory, a story to whisper later. Did his skin feel different? Was there a tangible weight to his presence? You would never know his thoughts, but you knew the precise pattern of moles on his back, a knowledge both profoundly personal and utterly meaningless. Then there were the poets like Martial who treated the baths as their living notebook. You would hear him before you saw him, a man with sharp eyes and a quicker tongue, observing the human parade. While you refilled an oil flask nearby, you might catch the soft mutter of Latin verse taking shape, head watch a wealthy merchant clumsily drop a gold ring, then scramble to find it with comical panic. A flicker of a smile would cross Martial's face, and a few hours later, that same merchant would be immortalized in a wicked, rhyming epigram circulating through the city, his vanity punctured for public amusement. You had been there, you saw the moment of inspiration stolen from the steam, the raw human folly that became art. Your silent presence was the poet's perfect cover, allowing him to observe without being observed in return. You weren't just serving a client, you were an unwitting witness to the birth of a satire that all of Rome would soon be quoting, and on rare, electrifying days, the air itself would change before anyone entered. A hushed tension would ripple through the complex, managers suddenly standing straighter, attendants moving with frantic precision. The emperor was coming. A ruler like Hadrian, famous for his restless travels and his desire to be seen as a man of the people, might visit the public baths precisely to perform his accessibility. When he entered, the sea of bathers would part, yet he would wave off special treatment, insisting on using the common pools. Your heart would hammer against your ribs as you were pushed forward to perform a service. Perhaps you handed him a towel, Maybe you were the one to scrape the sweat and dust of the Palatine Hill from his shoulders. Your hands, which handled firewood and dirty sponges, now touched the anointed skin of the ruler of the known world. His gaze might pass over you, a brief, impersonal acknowledgement. He was there to be seen by the people, not to see you, but in that fleeting contact, the entire absurd hierarchy of your life crystallized. You were at once closer to ultimate power than most senators ever got, and yet more invisible than ever. He was a man with pores and sweat and tired muscles, but the office he held made the simple act of pouring water for him feel like a sacred duty. That story of the day you served the emperor will be told and retold for the rest of your life, not because he remembered you, but because you could never forget the terrifying, ordinary weight of his presence. These brushes with fame did not elevate you. They simply highlighted the vast, uncrossable canyon between your station and theirs, a canyon you navigated every day with a strigil in one hand and a story quietly burning in your memory. Even the steam seemed to hold a whisper of the divine. Beyond the physical grind, your world was watched over by gods, and your survival often felt like a negotiation with them. Every major bath complex housed small shrines, often tucked into an alcove near the entrance or in a quiet corner of the palaestra. Here you would find a simple altar to Fortuna, the goddess of luck and fortune. Before your shift, you might press a finger to your lips and then touch her stone feet, a silent plea for generous patrons and plentiful sportula. Your offering was meager, perhaps a crumb of your morning bread or a single dried bean, but the hope it carried was immense. You were asking the divine to intervene in an economy of copper coins, to tilt the unpredictable scale of human generosity in your favor. Another constant presence was Hygeia, the daughter of the healing god Asclepius. Her statue, often shown with a snake drinking from a bowl in her hand, was a poignant symbol in a place of hidden sickness. You would offer a drop of oil or a splash of clean water at her shrine, not for the health of the patrons, but for your own. You begged her protection from the rashes that bloomed on your legs, from the cough that rattled in your chest, from the infections that swam in the warm pools. It was a desperate irony, praying to the goddess of hygiene for safety from the very institution built to promote it. Your faith was practical, a spiritual supplement to the physical endurance your body was forced to maintain. This superstition wove itself into the smallest routines. Before entering the furnace room, you might spit 3 times into your palm and clap once, a quick charm against the fire spirits, the larvae who could cause a burn or a sudden flare-up. If you dropped a strigil, you would pick it up with your left hand and tap it twice on your forehead before using it again, a ritual to dispel any ill luck it had absorbed from the floor. The greatest fear was not from the gods above, but from the envy of those beside you. The evil eye, the invidia, was a real and present danger. If a colleague had a particularly good day of tips or caught the manager's favorable attention, jealous glances could follow. You might wear a small carved phallus amulet, the fascinum, under your tunic, believing its power could deflect the malicious gaze of a resentful fellow attendant. You avoided direct praise, downplaying a good tip with a shrug, lest you attract the attention of envious spirits. These practices were not a separate part of your life, they were the spiritual texture of your labor. They gave you a sense of agency in a world where you had so little control. You could not command a senator's generosity, but you could whisper a prayer to Fortuna. You could not sterilize the water, but you could make an offering to Hygeia. You could not see the jealousy in a coworker's heart, but you could wear a charm against it. This layer of ritual was your psychological armor, a way to map meaning and intention onto the chaotic, hazardous landscape of your day. It transformed the random cruelty of a scalding pipe or a stolen purse from mere misfortune into something that could potentially be managed, appeased, or warded off with the right gesture. Your faith was in the scrape of bronze on skin, in the heat of the furnace, and in the quiet, desperate hope that the gods of the bathhouse were watching, and that they might just take your side. The faintest glimmer of a better life was not found in a hidden purse, but in the slow, grinding trust of your superiors. Advancement within the rigid world of the baths was not a ladder, but a treacherous, narrow ledge you might inch along over a lifetime of perfect service. The first, most tangible step was not up but sideways into a role of immense responsibility. If you proved yourself utterly honest and vigilant, you might be promoted to Capsarius, the guardian of the apoditerium. This was no small thing. It meant you were trusted with the collective wealth of the patrons every single day. You were the one who issued the terracotta tokens, who memorized faces, who stood as the final barrier against the chaos of theft. Your hands, which once only carried firewood, now held the ledger of trust. The pay might be slightly better, or your share of the sportula might be guaranteed, but the real change was in the nature of your fear. You traded the physical peril of the furnaces for the psychological terror of total accountability. One mistake, one moment of distraction, and the ledge you stood on crumbled away beneath you. From there the path grew even more obscure, visible only to those who could read and calculate. A capsarius with a sharp mind and the rare skill of literacy might catch the eye of the balneater, the bathhouse manager. You could become his assistant, his right hand. Your world would shift from the steamy halls to the cramped office at the back of the complex. Here you learned the true machinery of the business. You counted the oil flasks not to clean them but to track profit. You tallied the daily admissions. You negotiated with the wood merchants and the perfume sellers. You managed the payroll for the other attendants. You became the man who knew the cost of everything, from a drop of spikenard to an hour of a slave's labor. This was a position of quiet power. You were still a servant, but now you served the system itself. Your loyalty was to the balneater, and through careful, discreet management, you could make his enterprise thrive, and in doing so, secure your own fragile position. You wore a slightly cleaner tunic, you ate slightly better food, and the other attendants now looked at you with a mixture of respect and wary distance, for you held the power to dock their pay or assign them the worst duties. For the rarest of individuals, a freedman who had climbed this internal ladder and saved every possible coin, the ultimate dream flickered on the horizon. It was the dream of becoming the balneater himself, not of a grand imperial bath complex that was the domain of the wealthy and connected, but of a small neighborhood bathhouse, a balneolum in a quieter district or a provincial town. With a lifetime of savings and a hard-won reputation for honesty and competence, you might secure a loan or find a patron to back you. You would lease the building from its owner and run it as your own business. Suddenly you were the one counting the sportula, not receiving it. You were the one hiring and firing, the one worrying about the furnace repairs and the water tax. The scent of smoke and steam was no longer the smell of your labor, but the smell of your livelihood. This was the pinnacle, a transformation from a body used by the system to a mind that operated a small piece of it. Yet even here you were not truly free. You answered to the property owner, to the local officials, to the whims of the economy. A drought could raise the price of firewood. An outbreak of illness could empty your pools for weeks. The social hierarchy still pressed down. A disgruntled senator could still ruin you with a word. But you had a name and a title and a door you could lock at night. This faint, almost impossible glimmer of mobility was what fueled decades of silent observation and uncomplaining labor. It was the story you told yourself as you scrubbed the latrines, that this was not your forever fate, but a grueling apprenticeship for a future you were determined to claim. The system was rigid, but at its rarest joints it could bend, just enough for 1 in 10,000 to slip through. The marble beneath your feet never felt the empire's tremors, but the water did. For centuries, the aqueducts were the silent, pulsing arteries of Rome, bringing pure mountain water to the baths with a reliability as certain as sunrise. But an empire is a fragile machine. As political instability grew and coffers emptied, the maintenance of those magnificent stone channels became a lower priority. A barbarian raid in a distant province could cut off the supply of lead for pipes. A corrupt official might siphon the funds meant for cleaning silt from the channels. You would arrive for your shift and turn the bronze spigot, only to hear a hollow cough and then a trickle, where once there was a steady, powerful stream. The crisis was slow but undeniable. The great pools took longer to fill. The water in the caldarium grew tepid, unable to reach its former blistering heat because the wood supply was also dwindling, becoming more expensive with each shipment. Your labor multiplied. Hauling water from backup cisterns with heavy amphorae became a constant, back-breaking addition to your duties, just to keep the baths functioning at a basic level. The social world mirrored this physical decay. The wealthy patrons, those who had driven the economy of tips and luxury, began to retreat. Feeling the uncertainty of the times, they invested in private bath suites within their own fortified townhouses. Why mingle with an increasingly desperate and restless populace when you could have security and control at home? the baths, once the great social leveler, became the domain of the common citizen and the poor. The intricate dance of politics and business slowly moved elsewhere, leaving behind a quieter, emptier, and more financially strained institution. Your income from sportula dried up like a summer stream. The faces you scraped were now those of men worried about their next meal, not their next business deal. The conversations you overheard were no longer about senatorial votes, but about the rising price of grain and rumors of invaders at the frontier. Your profession, always precarious, now teetered on the edge of oblivion. The manager, your balneator, grew perpetually grim, fretting over impossible accounts. He might cut the hours of operation, closing the baths 2 days a week to save on fuel and wages. He might let go of half the staff, forcing those who remained, like you, to do the work of 3. The grand halls felt cavernous and echoing, patches of soot darkening the ceiling where repairs to the hypocaust went unmade. The brilliant mosaics under the frigidarium water grew cloudy with a permanent film, because the meticulous daily scrubbing was now a weekly, rushed chore. You worked in a monument that was slowly becoming a relic, its grandeur fading under a layer of neglect and quiet desperation. The certainty of your world, the rhythm of fire, water, and steam, was unraveling. You were no longer maintaining an empire's vital organ. You were performing last rites for a dying ideal, wondering what would happen when the last furnace finally went cold and the great bronze doors closed for good. The furnaces you fed now sit cold and silent, buried under centuries of earth, but they did not vanish. Your world left a physical echo, a trail of soot and metal and discarded tools that modern archaeologists carefully brush clean. This is not the Rome of poets and senators, but the Rome of your calloused hands and aching back, written in the language of lead pipes and broken tiles. When excavators reach the service corridors of a bath complex, they find the prefurnia, the furnace mouths, still blackened by ancient fires. The soot on those bricks contains your sweat, the microscopic ash of the wood you carried. The hypocaust pillars you crawled between, checking for cracks, stand in orderly rows like a petrified forest, holding up nothing but dirt. They are a testament to the engineering you maintained, a hidden skeleton that made the luxury above possible. We find the pipes too, not the grand aqueduct arches, but the humble lead conduits you unclogged with an iron rod. Their joints show the marks of hammers and pliers, the physical evidence of constant repair and worry over the water's flow. And everywhere in the drains and in the corners are the strigils, hundreds of them. Some are simple iron, bent and worn smooth by 1,000 strokes. Others are bronze, finely made with decorated handles, perhaps lost by a wealthy patron and never claimed. Holding one, you can feel the curve that fit against a shoulder blade, the edge that had to be just sharp enough. They are not museum pieces, but the most personal extension of your labor, discarded and forgotten, now speaking volumes about the scale and repetition of your work. Then there are the walls, in the back corridors, away from the polished marble. Someone took a nail or a sharp stone and scratched a message into the plaster. It might be a simple tally marked counting days or a crude drawing of a chariot. Sometimes it is a name like Marcus or Lucius, followed by the word Capsarius or Servus. In that instant, the abstraction of history collapses. This is not a general bath attendant. This is Marcus, who guarded the changing room, bored or proud enough to claim his spot on the wall. This is Lucius the slave, leaving the faintest possible proof that he was here, that he existed beyond his function. This graffiti is the closest we come to your voice, a whisper across 2 millennia that says, "I was here. I did this work." These physical remnants force us to revise the literary record. Roman writers like Seneca complained about the noise and the crowds, and moralists decried the luxury. But the archaeology tells a different story, one of astonishing infrastructure and relentless maintenance. The sheer volume of lost strigils points to a bustling, crowded, messy reality. The engineering of the hypocaust speaks of a society willing to invest staggering effort for public comfort. The evidence in the drains, the hair, the lost coins, the broken jewelry paints a vivid picture of the chaotic human reality you navigated every day. To hold a soot-caked brick from your furnace is to touch the heat of your day. To read a scratched name in a service corridor is to meet your gaze across the ages. The legacy of your life is not in the grand histories, but in the quiet, stubborn physicality of the world you kept running, a world that refused to disappear completely, waiting in the dark for someone to finally see the marks you left behind. So your life as a Roman bath attendant was not one of glory or leisure. It was a symphony of labor played on an instrument of marble and steam. Your days were measured in loads of firewood, in the rhythmic scrape of the strigil, and in the careful, silent steps you took to remain unseen. You existed in a space of profound contradiction. You were essential to the functioning of Rome's greatest social institution, yet you were expected to be invisible. You handled fortunes in the changing room, yet a single copper coin in your palm represented a day's survival. You heard the secrets of senators and the plots of merchants, yet to speak a word of them meant ruin. Your body bore the cost of Rome's cleanliness, marked by rashes and coughs, while you maintained the very ideal of salubritas for others. It was a life of intimate service and immense vulnerability, a constant navigation between the searing heat of the furnaces and the icy chill of social hierarchy. You were the human foundation upon which an empire's relaxation was built. Next time you step into a quick private shower, take a moment to remember the complex, communal, steamy world of the thermae. Remember the echoing halls, the scent of perfume and smoke, and the thousands of unseen figures who kept the water flowing and the secret safe. If you enjoyed this journey into the daily grind of history, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of the unseen. Let me know in the comments which ancient job you'd like us to explore next.